Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Good evening, Franklin. How are you doing?
Good evening, Edward.
You all right? You seem distracted today. You okay?
Just tired. I sent up the SC200 Labs update, so I'll wait for that to go out and get published, and a few modifications. So that was kind of interesting, digging deep into all of the new functionality that's within inside Sentinel since the last time the labs were there. How about yourself?
In the interest of time, we're gonna go to Brody first, since he's out on the 8th, and he's trying to make birdie. Brody,
At least he's not on the 9th hole.
He's not. How you doing, Brody? What's up, man?
I'm good, gentlemen, and Rebecca and viewers. Hope everyone's doing well. Just out in beautiful British Columbia, not at a computer, having a great time. And yeah, my Bluetooth doesn't work, so I don't know if I'll be able to listen in on this because holding this up, my camera up, does not work for a golf swing. I hope I could try it, but I don't think it's going to work out too well.
I was going to say your cameraman sucks. I don't know who's doing that. There you go.
There you go. Brody, the living Muppet.
It's good to hear and see you too, bud. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, okay.
Next time you jump out of a helicopter, that's the video we want. Forget the golf course.
For sure. Now, technically, when you heli ski, the helicopter lands. That's the biggest misconception.
You don't have to tell us. It's your story. Go ahead. It's your story.
That's
Go ahead.
fair. But I've climbed into a helicopter that has not fully landed once because we got stuck in a weird spot snowboarding, and he had to come pick us up, but he couldn't quite land, so we had to climb up into it while it was flying.
And
don't tell anybody we did that.
So they banned you from the next ride, right? It's kind of a punishment.
Exactly. Oh, now my wife's calling. Okay. I'll be back later. Bye, team.
Okay. Peace.
All right. So I'll go back. You asked me what I've been doing this week.
Well, you're back at home now instead of bothering me here in Reston.
Hey, to our listeners, I got to see Franklin in person. It's been over 2 years since we've been face to face. We've had opportunities, but travel, schedule, distance. You decided you want to eat Chick-fil-A rather than have a good dinner I was going to provide for you. You wanted Chick-fil-A to eat. No, it was a good show. I was sort of listening to it, and I think the funny part, you got cut off though when the cleaning people told us, "All right, wrap it up." Trying to get out of here, right? What have I been doing? Matt Egan and I were working on some stuff for some threat intel today. We had a customer that wanted to go through some very, very customized analytic rules writing. What else did I do today? Some KQL, because it's a never-ending journey to learn. I'm not smart like the rest of the people here. I have to work at it, right? So we're doing that. And then what else? There's one more thing to do. Oh, trying to line up next podcast guests, because we're booked out through July almost. We're trying to get August and September up. Yeah, and the massive updates in my lab. I remember I haven't been giving it enough attention, but analytic rules updates, playbook updates, a few other things, and then Andrea Fisher is working on something that I'm interested in, and she needs my help on. Need my help. She needs my insight on this risk scoring thing that they're trying to do. This person wrote this playbook called STAT. So maybe we'll talk about it on another show. It's actually pretty decent. It's trying to do built-in risk scoring, but they need someone to help understand and not make the number so arbitrary. Like you scored a 103. What does 103 mean?
Yep.
Is it better than 104? Is it lower the better? Like golf, is higher the better? So doing that, we'll see. What about you, Mr. Trent?
It's been an interesting week. Speaking of KQL, since that will kind of be the pinnacle of our topic of discussion today. I just signed off on the Must Learn KQL workshop deck today, and it's going to be delivered to a customer here in the next couple of weeks. And if everything goes well, get the feedback back, then it's going to be an official offering from Microsoft for a KQL workshop for our customers, and partners can deliver it and stuff like that. I wanted to show you this T-shirt. Everybody knows what that is, right? That's Monty Python. That's Father's Day gift from my youngest daughter. So that's just literally evidence that I've raised her right.
Mm-hmm.
She knows about Monty Python. And happy Father's Day to all the other father types. I don't want to exclude anyone. So
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome.
Father's Day. And
Had a good weekend.
Father's Day was uneventful for me. Yard work a little bit, a
Yeah.
lot of beer drinking, a little bit of food cooking. I put a new grill together the other day. I guess I've forgotten the pain of having to put a grill together. I get it delivered. Put this hidden here and so and so. Make sure not to skip. And like, the door's on backwards. Golly, take these things off. Other than that, man, it was pretty good. So, but hey, I know that we're up here, and it took a lot of moving and shaking, promises, campaign donations to get Matt on here, and and a few other things. So, Matt, I could do your introduction, but it wouldn't do justice. I think everybody knows you from Reprise 99, 365 days of KQL, uh, you know, building the first quantum computer that works at room temperature, but I'll let you do your own introductions and welcome to the show, man. We really appreciate you coming on.
Anytime. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. So yeah, my name's Matt. I live in Western Australia, so it's very early in the morning down here. It's 10 past 5. But and about a year ago, I decided that I would write 365 KQL queries. Why? I'm not really sure why, to be honest. I woke up one day and thought, this seems like a good idea today. At times during the stretch, it didn't feel as good an idea, but we certainly got there in the end. And it was mostly started just for me to practice myself. I knew if I started it, I'd definitely kind of finish it. That's just the way I'm wired. And then along the way, it's actually turned out to be really amazing for a lot of people. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and kind of thank me for helping them or just asking for queries. I'm sure Rod gets the same all the time when, a query you've already written can save someone a whole lot of time in their kind of day-to-day life. It might be one that's already ready to go for them and things like that, and just exploring what's in the data and different ways you can look at it has been amazing. So we wrapped up yesterday, and now there's a GitHub repo there with a few hundred queries that anyone can go and access.
I visited. It is a phenomenal content resource. You're definitely, I think Brody asked a while back, what are the top 5 podcasts and top 5 people, and you were in my top 5, right? Being able to say, hey, this lowers the learning curve by going in and see some of the stuff and the collateral and content is already there. You do so much with it, you have another announcement. Anything you want to talk about where you get to leverage your skill sets?
Yeah. Well, I have to thank Rod and yourself just for giving me side. So in a week, just over a week, I'm starting at Microsoft Dart. So I'll be kind of on the other side of the fence, joining the Microsoft team and still using KQL. It'll obviously be in a slightly different context, but I think the skills I picked up along the journey certainly helped me land the job, as well as the awesome guidance that you guys gave me and a number of other people. So yeah, start on July 4. So you guys will be out with fireworks and getting drunk and celebrating independence and what you do, but I'll be probably doing HR videos.
You mean they don't celebrate American Independence Day in Australia?
Unfortunately not. That would be good.
So what did you do with your time? What did you do with your time before 365 days of KQL? How did you get to where you're at today and getting the job at Microsoft? What's your background?
So my day-to-day work now is I'm basically a cybersecurity operations specialist, so probably what you'd deem like a blue teamer, essentially. I work in the mining and energy sector here in Australia, and we've been using Sentinel for a little while, probably a few years now, and our usage of it's ramped up. And I guess when I first started looking at it, I didn't really appreciate just how powerful KQL and Sentinel was, and we have a fair bit of data going in there for sure. So it was kind of trying to marry up what we do with our day-to-day life. We've got all this data, and what's some smart ways to look at it, to find things, to help our users out. And as I was going through that, I thought there's probably a chance there's other people in a similar space, especially even if you're not using Sentinel, if you've got access to advanced hunting in the M365 side as well, that's KQL as well. And it's turned out there's a lot of kind of demand, again, as Rod would know, that it seems to be getting very popular with people, and people are starting to understand how to drive it a little bit and things like that. And I'm a learner by doer. So if I just need to go in there and break and cause errors and try and find stuff, that's the way I learn. So
yeah, I think every single Azure related admin needs to learn KQL.
Well,
it's
and not
certainly-
just because you can get a job at Microsoft, right?
Well, it helps to speak the language and not need it.
It does.
Than to need the language and not be able to speak it, right?
Yeah.
Even in a minuscule amount, it allows you to add context to otherwise nothing that's making sense, right? Yeah. I think Franklin had another question. Franklin, were you going to ask something?
I've got a lot of questions, so why don't you get yours out of the way first, and then
I'll save my question for the last, so Matt has time to think about it. You did 365 days of it. I don't know if you have any informal or formal use analytics, but I'd love at the end of the show to give us what your top 5 queries that you wrote, and then maybe what your listeners thought were the best 5. And we can do it at the end of the show.
Yeah, sure. I have a think for sure.
Okay.
all right, you ready for my questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go?
Well, no, I'll go along. I'll interject as you go along. I have some questions, but I think they kind of, yep.
All right, so in learning KQL, how much did you find that the syntax is repetitive, but it's really understanding the data, which is the most important part?
That is 100% accurate. Yeah, for sure. It feels like, I think there's this initial kind of hump you need to get over, and that's learning the syntax and learning what things do and how to find what you're after. And especially like if you're trying to summarize data, that can be a little intimidating at first, but it feels like once you get over that hump, it's quite repetitious, and that it's almost like you've got a style of query. So this type of query might find new events, or it might find events that have stopped happening. And you can really apply that to any data set. And then it's about understanding how that data looks, because it can be inconsistent. You could have custom stuff being sent in there that's, unique to your organization, or you've got 2 firewalls they send slightly different data because one says I've blocked something and one says I've denied something, and they're ultimately the same, but the data doesn't line up. So it's like the biggest piece of it, or one of the biggest pieces, definitely understanding what's available in your data sets, especially things like, Azure AD sign-in logs that are very verbose. There's all kinds of stuff hidden in there, like, where you're logging on from and whether you're logging on from a device that's known to Azure AD and things like that. So yeah, a lot of my time was spent just looking what's interesting and what other people would find interesting or make their lives easier, for sure.
Building out my list here. So do you have a background in writing T-SQL statements, or are you completely new to writing database-like statements?
Completely new to writing database statements, and no experience in other seams either. So no Splunk or Elastic or anything else like that. So before kind of pivoting over to cybersecurity, I was kind of like you probably call like a sysadmin, I guess. So looking after on-prem AD and Exchange and Office 365 and group policy, and coming from that side. So certainly got a bit of a PowerShell background, but I never really mastered PowerShell the way I'm trying to with KQL. I was more a copy and paste off the internet and Frankenstein PowerShell together kind of guy and borrowing a bit from this and this and hoping it works. So yeah, I didn't have any, I guess, like data background before this. I had the cybersec background, so I knew kind of what I was looking for, just not initially how to get to it.
I mean, for me, coming from a SQL background, I always make mistakes with piping because I think it's the normal join situation or whatever. So conceptually, what was the largest challenge that you had to get over in learning? So mine, you would think piping would be the easiest thing in the world, but just because of my SQL background, that's where I make the most mistakes. So conceptually, what was the challenge for you that once you got over that, you felt like, yeah, now everything clicks?
Definitely the hardest bit for me was learning how to join different data tables together, for sure. So if you've got an Azure AD sign-in event and then an Office 365 event, how to marry them up, because you might be interested in things from both sides, but the data structure's not the same, and it's certainly a bit of trial and error. And then the different types of joins as well. So do you want stuff from both tables, or do you only want things from one table or from the other? Yeah, I still, the kind of the Microsoft Docs on joining, I seem to permanently have open as one of my tabs because I think I confuse myself by overthinking it now. But yeah, joining for sure, and just aligning those data sets can be quite tricky, especially if you're like a hybrid type environment where you've got on-prem AD and Azure AD, which I suspect a lot of people do. We certainly do. We're quite a large on-prem footprint still. And the logging is very, very different. Something coming off a Windows server compared to something like Azure AD that's kind of cloud native, and it's a little more modern, and there's more details in there compared to a security events kind of. There's not really much in there when all's said and done.
All right, now this is a trick question. Would you prefer to have watch list data stored in an external data location or in the Sentinel watch list area?
It probably depends what the data is. In general, probably a watch list, I would say, because it's kind of indexed and it's more efficient. But there are good use cases for external data as well. You'll also with external data, I think you'll hit a performance and a rate limit at some point that I don't think you will for watch lists. Is that on the exam?
Yeah.
No. It's just an ongoing.
It's a religious war, is it?
I think Frank's monitoring my inbox because that's exactly what I was working on today.
Yeah.
Oh, really? All right. So now, what were the lessons learned in two areas that I want to know about? One is about string parsing, and the other one is about performance. So, what were the lessons learned in both of those areas?
Yeah, so performance is probably the easier one to answer. So whenever I started writing something, I always tried to start quite broad, and quite broad means quite inefficient, but that's okay to start with what you want to try and look for. So it felt like each query I wrote was a bit like a funnel that you start really wide and you're trying to capture everything. You're initially going to get a lot of white noise and stuff you don't care about in there, but gradually you're going to filter your query down and make it more specific and more accurate. And in doing that, you make it more efficient at the same time. So balance with that is you have to be very careful with case sensitivity in KQL, is that, a double equals is case sensitive. So if your data is not consistent, sometimes it's worth sacrificing a little bit of efficiency to ensure you get all the results. If you've got a username that randomly has a capital letter in it and you use a double equal sign, there's a good chance you're going to miss it. So that's how I started. And with I think parsing strings can be very difficult, especially if they're not if they're coming down in a JSON or an XML or something like that, it's usually pretty easy because KQL can handle that itself. But if you're getting like syslog or events off firewalls where it's just one string of text, yeah, sometimes you just got to step back and take a walk away from it from a little bit because it can be infuriating. I think I wrote like a 1,600 line parser for an ASA at one point, which just there was about, you know, the ASA was sending about 70 different events, and absolutely none of them were in the same order. So you kind of had to take them one by one and say, oh, what's this firewall actually trying to tell me, and then make it readable. And that's always been a big thing with me with my queries, is I want to make anyone be able to pick them up and have them
You didn't
make
put
sense.
documentation in it, did you, in the queries? I hope not.
Yeah, I try like a little like comments essentially in there, just saying, look, this is what we're doing and this is what we're looking for. And I like renaming the columns at the end, so just so that they're more readable, like making time generated. You can kind of turn that into, this was the time the event happened, or it was an MFA event time, or just something that makes, when someone picks it up and runs it, you can kind of see what my logic is there. And then I think that makes it easier for people if they're kind of using one of my queries, but they've got a slightly different use case. And if it's kind of laid out easily, maybe they can change one or two little things and bang, they've got what they're after there.
So were you a GitHub person before KQL?
I was not a GitHub person before KQL. I always joked I was a 55 unsaved tabs in PowerShell ISE kind of source control. That's yeah, my man. That was my source control before that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had to learn PR pull requests and things like that. So it's been good, and I can appreciate it. I think I don't understand how Git works. It seems like just complete magic under the hood, but it somehow works. And I've submitted a few things to the official repo as well. And I can't admit to understand. To be honest,
the Git magic wasn't anything. Even though Microsoft owns the company now, it wasn't anything super innovative. It came more efficient and more open source and more available because there were always control mechanisms for code sourcing. The heavyweight for a long time was Visual Studio, but it's heavy, right? And Visual Studio Server, yeah.
So you should watch a video from John. Can't remember his last name now. YouTube, got over 100,000. Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, he's got one about GitHub, and it really goes into great detail about everything. So it's really a good video to watch to understand the product from there. All right.
What's the person's name again, guys?
John Saville. John Saville.
Oh, yeah.
So have you looked at the whole asym parser development side that Microsoft's done?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we have those deployed in our environment, and I've watched both the there's a couple of video casts just introducing the concept. It took me a little while to kind of digest it and understand it. I think it's really, really exciting and like a great idea. I think it would be like, I think those guys must have the patience of absolute saints just to deal with all the different combinations of data and vendors out there and trying to normalize that. But it's so valuable. It's like I was talking about earlier, where a checkpoint or a Cisco, that they slightly call things differently. So one's a block and one's a deny. If you're creating a rule trying to look for firewall deniers, you're interested in all of them, regardless of the vendor and regardless of what under the hood the logs look like. So yeah, that work they're doing is fantastic, and yeah, like I said, must be infuriating at times, but it's amazing.
It could be super tedious work. I'm seeing some benefits coming out of it with some of the easier data connector stuff and being able to map entities and stuff. So and plus one of the guys that I work with Ren sort of touches that stuff too. He's helping out. But yeah, it is a evolution of passion.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, I could understand. It would be very satisfying, I think, to kind of wrap one up and publish it and just go, that's now done. Like, I imagine getting to that point would feel great for the team doing it.
Yeah, I think the point though, and I think the value that we're kind of talking about with KQL is that even if you have a 1600 line KQL query, it can still do the job. It can still parse that stuff out. It's not that, well, it's going to take a long time, right? But it's not that difficult to do. This query language has that capability. It's not like you're going to create some massive query that you run it and then you have to spend the next 2 days debugging. It's going to tell you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you get an error very quickly, and even those big passes, they seem to be quite efficient as well. It doesn't seem to look. I've written some pretty ordinary queries over the time, but in general, it performs very well. Even, and the advanced hunting side's probably a little slower, but that's just as good. It's a very similar KQL kind of set you get in there. It's not the same as Sentinel, but it's pretty close in there.
Hey, Matt, can you drop your, we have a question from a chat, but I got to send you a picture. So can you drop your email in the chat there so I can grab it?
Yep.
And I will send you the
There you go.
okay, great. So this will come out to you. It should be there in a few minutes. Let me get it organized here for you and
Yeah,
get the
that
question
works.
going.
Yeah. So you obviously did the 365 days of KQL for yourself, right? And I personally kind of noticed the evolution of your first queries all the way to the end. I mean, it got really, really good. Did it surprise you the number of people that started following and participating?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I had a Twitter account for a little while, but it was more I just kind of passively just read along, which I think a lot of people just tend to do just to pick up information, especially in InfoSec. It seems to be a great kind of knowledge sharing platform. And then I started a little blog initially, which was just just as I learned things in Sentinel that again, for my own learning, if I write it down, I have a tendency to remember it a little bit better. And then I decided, I was like, oh, I'm actually building up quite a few queries here, and I started sharing them, and the feedback from people has been really overwhelming and really positive. I've had a lot of people message me directly just asking for help, which is always cool. And look, I know some of the people I chat to, they're in quite small kind of IT teams where they're maybe the sysadmin and they're the security team, and they're probably managing anything that has power in the building. Like having worked in that kind of lone sysadmin role, I think that's maybe the most difficult job in IT. And they've probably got access to the information they need. They just can't kind of wrangle it out in a time, or it's going to take them, hours and hours. So if we can help out people like that by sending them a query, that's what it's all about, for sure.
You help me out. I like the cold beer query, where cold beer equals. I think you put coffee and I put beer. What you said has physical proof, because there was a listener to our podcast who was a sole security person at a company, and he felt overwhelmed, but he got that support group by coming through the Microsoft Security Insight. And I'm talking about Asif, right? And he's on with Microsoft now, right? So listen to the pod, and watch the videos and get hired at Microsoft. That's our tagline. You get hired, right? What does your day consist of? I mean, it's I know that you're getting ready to switch roles here pretty soon, but where is the study versus creating content, or is it all ingrained as you create, you learn?
Yeah, so my day today is where I work in a relatively smallish cybersec team. So we do kind of all kinds of things. We do threat hunting. We do tabletops. We do people requesting local admin access. We do detections from Sentinel. So impossible travel type things like that. So It's a combination. Look, as there's always something new I find to detect in cybersec. There's always a new vulnerability. There's always a new threat actor doing something out there, and usually there's a query to help along the way to find it. So some of them, there's an overlap. Some of the queries I write are useful for my day-to-day work. Some of them, we don't use the product, so I use like a dev tenancy, or I use the log analytics test environment to run up queries. So we're just trying to basically, keep the bad guys out, I guess, as well. And I think the other thing I found going through the 365 days of KQL is that not everything has to be like a threat detection. I think that's where you start with, but you also have a lot of great data in there that can help just with good security posture. So whether that's legacy authentication, you've got access to that data. So you might think you've got thousands and thousands of users still using legacy auth, but when you dig into the data, it might actually only be 20 users. They're just those 20 users are very noisy. Or there was another query I did which was looking for people who are already using MFA, but they're just using text message. So we can use that data to maybe lift them up to using a push notification or number matching and things like that. So we're doing all those kind of things at the office and trying to reduce local admins and trying to reduce people RDPing to 100 servers and just the normal stuff.
On that particular use case, seeing the authentication methods, what are active for the user and what they're using, evidently your query must have hit the ears of the Azure Active Directory product team, because that's built into it now. You can look at the authentication methods and who's adopted everything from Windows Hello. So you can still do it by using the KQL query, but I think they've sort of added that feature into Azure AD. I saw it. I actually used it. It's young. There's not a lot of customization, but if I need a quick idea of who is using what as the authentication method, it's an Azure AD authentication method to our users. It can be helpful, and you can export it to a 100%. CSV file. Did your query export the results to a CSV file?
You can just do it within Sentinel itself. So the results of anything, there's a export CSV button.
Once you run the query at the very top, you just say export.
Yeah, you can just pop it out. Yeah. So look, I try to, most of my queries I've tried to keep just within the window there itself, but obviously at times Excel is still very useful to pivot on that, especially when you're talking about large data sets, for sure.
How many KQL queries did you write, or is it even applicable around watch lists? Because watch lists are Franklin's favorite feature.
Yeah.
Don't want to go down this path. Don't go there.
A love song to watch lists. So I didn't share any queries with them because I think watch lists are going to be pretty unique to each customer with what they choose to put in there. We use them for things like privileged group. Like when we know these certain groups are privileged, we put them in a watch list, and then we alert on when changes are made to them. So some of them are going to be quite obvious. So domain admins, enterprise admins, or on the Azure AD side, global admin or application admin. But it's likely you have something unique to your environment that's very privileged, that's named something like very unique to your environment, and maybe this group gives you access to all these servers and things like that. So we have a curated list of 50 or so groups, I would say, that we just happen to know are privileged, and then if a new group comes along, we add it to the watch list, and the query doesn't need any further adjustment. It's just another group to monitor on, and then we'll get a Sentinel alert that says someone's been added to these groups. Usually it's like a new starter that's come on in one of those teams, so it's not a problem, but definitely worth checking out.
So let me ask you this: what is your, and you kind of touched on this, what is your process? And somebody comes up with, hey, we're very worried that people are using this specific tactic or technique. Can you go and find if that's been happening in our environment? So what is the process that you go through and think, getting started with this to go through to write the KQL statement?
Yeah, so the process I go through is, like you say, if you read a report of this is a kind of a new attack that's happening, is I try to see if I can simulate that in my environment. Obviously not in a destructive way, but something similar. There was one probably a few months ago now that they mentioned, what the attackers are starting to do now is that they're starting to just spam users with MFA prompts until basically they get sick of it and they get fed up and they probably hit OK just to be done with it, and they don't want their phone beeping every second at 2 a.m. So I basically went and did that. So I logged on to something that I needed MFA, and I just kept hitting it. And then I went and looked at my account. I was like, I can see the MFA events. And if you look in like the Azure AD sign-in log, will actually tell you that user denied the authentication, user denied the authentication.
You just start with like a search statement at that. So number one is try to generate test data. Number two, you're basically at that point in time, you just use a search statement to actually find something that that makes sense, and then build out from there. Is that how you go about doing it? Or the data enough now that you're just, I know where to go?
So initially I used the search statement when you're not sure what table this event may show up in. Mm-hmm. After a little while, you kind of get a feel of, especially in your own tenant, what lives where. So that if you're doing on-prem things, it's probably a security event. If it's a Azure sign-in, it's a sign-in log. And then you look through, I was like, okay, here's my account, and I can see 5, 6, 7 very quick authentications. None of them have passed, and there's an error code. Okay, now I'm interested in that error code. And then once you've got that error code, let's go have a look. Is there anything more detailed we can use? Because an error code could cover 10 different things, and it covers them all. But with the MFA example, as you dig in, there's actually there's a reason for why it was declined. So it can be the user specifically said that wasn't me, or it could be that they put the wrong number in, or that they didn't get to it in time with that, which that one's often me because I don't know where my phone is. So then you could drill down on that. It's basically, show me when a user has denied it twice and then finally accepted within, say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever threshold you think is going to capture that kind of that behavior of, a person's probably going to deny it once the first time, for sure, probably a second time. After 2, you might be starting to bug them enough that they're willing to hit accept just so they can get back to bed.
So when you look at this, you build the first query that's show me everybody with account that's inside a certain time frame, and then you went and built another query that said show me all the accepts, and then you join the two together to see if there's any matches, right? Is that so? You have to mentally break out those different pieces, then join it together, because if you try to do all that within just in the beginning one query, can you do that without even having the join anyways, or is it just doing a count?
That one you can do. That one you can do without joining because it's just a single data set. So one of my favorite things in KQL is like how to summarize data. So you can make sets of things, or you can make lists of things. So the difference is a list is, say, we use the same example, is that, say, someone declined MFA 9 times and then hit accept. If you make a list out of that, you'll get all 10. If you make a set out of it, you'll only get 2 things, because it's only going to show you unique events. So it'll just show one deny and then 1 accept. So for that case, we're interested in a list, because we want to see, even if it was the same event, we want to see every time it happened, because that helps with our detection. So what I did is I made a list of essentially the MFA outcomes for one particular sign-on. And from that list, we can then count. We can be, okay, there's 3 deniers followed by an accept. That's a little suspicious. And then once you think you've got your query right, I want to do it again. So I go hit my account again, and then I want to look back to how much data I've got and see, well, how many hits am I actually going to see of this? Because in my head, I think we shouldn't get too much of that behavior. I can understand a user getting an MFA prompt wrong once, but we shouldn't be seeing it so often that there's something wrong with this query. Or
how many times have you thrown away a query and just or you've done it, you said, okay, I'm getting the right data, but this is so ugly, I have to do it again and make it the right way?
all the time. Yeah, all the time. I've got as I was writing them, I've got in my email, I might have to just share them at some point. There's about 50 on the scrap heap that I haven't cleaned up properly enough. All the time, or things that it's just infuriating to get to the data, or
The KQL
it's inconsistent. Yeah. So,
go ahead.
Sorry, no, you go ahead.
How many times have you written a detection query and then said, you know what, here's what happened, I can detect it, but now can I write a different query to detect it earlier?
That's obviously the dream for sure, especially as you look through those kind of, I guess they call it like a kill chain, whereas you can detect when something's happened, but can we detect earlier? We do have things like that in the environment. Some of those are very unique to our environment, and how I like to think of that is like, instead of writing a query that's looking at a particular IOC, or say there's a suspicious IP, well, it's going to be very easy for you to find that IP in your environment. If there's been a hit on it, KQL will find it. But we know that these IPs and these IOCs, they change very quickly. So what's the actual behavior that we're trying to detect, and is that behavior suspicious, or is it something you'll see a lot of in an environment? So there was an example, one of the malware variants a little while ago, they used the CertUtil tool to basically, you can go out to the internet and download stuff using CertUtil. So we could write a query that's looking for CertUtil usage going to a particular IOC, but maybe a better query is any use of CertUtil going to a public endpoint, which should be pretty unusual, I would guess. It's certainly unusual in our environment. So that's now kind of a behavioral query that we now run that's not tied to a particular IP or a hash, or because we know how quickly IPs changes. They don't last for an hour.
Frank asked a question, and I'm gonna ask it in a different manner. He said, "What query was just so ugly? You like, oh, I gotta do this over." But what request was beyond the ability of KQL to make meaningful? When did you get the Mission Impossible?
Trying to have a think if there's. Having a look. I guess the hardest ones are when you're trying to join multiple different data sets, and there's a chance that it just doesn't exist, like that data is just missing in one of them. So you get that with, some stuff in the Office activity log can be a little inconsistent for sure, and that especially with admin type actions. So if someone's created like an admin policy in Exchange, for whatever reason, that data hasn't flowed down. So some of the queries, actually, I've got a good example. There's conditional access policies is a good one, because you're very interested in when they're created, deleted, or updated. They're really the only 3 actions, and you're probably interested anytime one of those happens, because it can be a significant flow on to your posture and your rules. You click the wrong button and suddenly no MFA required. The problem is, in the audit log from Azure AD, everything's just stored as GUIDs essentially. So if you add a new group that bypasses one of your policies, it's going to be stored as just a GUID. It's really impossible to make any sense of what actually changed in this policy from the KQL. The data is just too hard to really make sense of. So in that instance, the best plan is really to alert when something changes and then go and have a look in the GUI, and you'll know which policy changed for sure. You can get that out of the log data, but you won't really know what changed on it until you get in there and have a look. So that's a good example where, look, sometimes, like, I'd love to do everything in KQL. It's a bit like PowerShell, right? Like the idea is that if you're good enough with PowerShell, you're never going to click through a GUI again. But sometimes it's just it's much quicker to click. The GUI is always going to be there for you. So
yeah, I was just looking through your GitHub repository. I haven't done this before. I probably should have, because it's actually kind of interesting. Me thinking from a cybersecurity perspective, an analyst, I kind of monitor user activity, right? That's my, yeah. But I'm looking through your queries here, right? The Office 365, I mean, there's plenty of queries that you wrote for that, but the majority of them are Azure Active Directory. Is there a reason behind that, or if that's just your favorite?
That speaks to probably my background more than anything, coming from a AD and Office 365 and Azure AD. Kind of, that's where my skill set kind of lies. I think they're also, in the world of zero trust and conditional access and moving to where identity is key. I think that's where a lot of movement is, and a lot of people are very interested in it. People often don't realize, if you're an Office 365 customer, you're an Azure AD customer as well. Or if you use, it's kind of ubiquitous. It's just so heavily used. So they were some of the more popular queries. Definitely. I think it's also one of the more like fully featured data sets. There's so much great stuff in there compared to other sources. So I think that's part of it.
Well, when you think about zero trust, right, that first pillar is identity. So maybe that has something to do with it. If we can, manage and monitor our identities, then the Office 365 stuff should go away potentially, right?
Eventually, we'll see. So you're how do you think you're I don't know much about where you're going to go working. I don't know if you said it on the show about what you're going to be doing at Microsoft, but how much of this KQL is going to be immediately impactful for you having this skill set?
It was one of the keys on the job description, just to have KQL knowledge. So I think it's definitely going to help me. The feeling I got from the interview process, and I think you can both speak to this, is I think passion, I guess, and the interest is probably as important as the technical ability. And it seemed like everyone I spoke to and asked for advice was basically, just be yourself. If you're passionate, show that you're passionate. If you're keen, show that you're keen. And I think this happened to be a good way. It wasn't wasn't what I planned doing. The role just came up, and I looked through the list of, this is what you need for this job, and I was like, hey, I tick more of those boxes than I kind of thought I would, and certainly more than a year or 2 years ago. And then, you put your hand up and you try your luck, and I was very fortunate this time.
I'm a little bit more aggressive than you. If there's 10 items and I can check one box, I'm highly qualified.
You're in.
I'm highly qualified on this, right? So your KQL skills are synonymous with being able to basically speak a phonic different language, right? Does it give you a little bit of autonomy, right? Because not once did I hear that you're a Sentinel expert, MDE expert, or anything else. You're a KQL guy. So does just being in the center hub allow you flexibility? Are you good at MDE, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or some of this other stuff?
So we use a mixed bag of Microsoft products. So we don't use Defender where we are. So I can't admit to being an expert at that. We obviously use Azure AD and things like that. But I think the KQL skills, they certainly transfer between data sets, because you know the ability to have a quick look at what's in there and what could be interesting, or one of the things I always do when looking at data is just like, show me what's not happening very much. Show me the low noise stuff, because there's often sometimes the interesting stuff's in there. If you look at like an audit log for Azure, there's going to be lots of group management type stuff, people getting added to groups, things like that. But when you start going down, I've only seen this event once in 30 days. That could be something more interesting. So I find those low volume things is a good place to start. So yeah, the skills, I think the KQL skills can transfer between. I don't think they're necessarily tied directly to an MDE or a Azure AD and things like that, because it's like we mentioned at the start, it's about a process. So if you learn how to look through a data set, it doesn't really matter what the data set is. Obviously, like having the more context you have is certainly going to help you, but yeah, I don't think they're necessarily tied directly together, being a MDE expert or being a Defender for Office expert and being a KQL expert, because you got KQL kind of underpins Azure Data Explorer as well, and you could use that while having no really Microsofty products in there. You could chuck anything in there and manipulate it.
True enough.
I hope that you get a chance to work on the anomaly detection rules with Inside Sentinel. We had a great comment from outside of Twitch from Noodle MCT Woodle, if I said that right, talking about simulating attacks. Obviously, he or she said simulating the attack vector is really useful. I often hit the Azure front door and OWASP Zap proxy to simulate different attack vectors. So, so from an Azure standpoint and a web app standpoint, do you use those sort of tools yourself? And then on client machines, you probably use our favorite tool, which is Rod, Edward. This is a quiz for you. Our favorite
Defender for Identity.
No. What you do the attacks? Come on, you even got a shirt from them.
So I'm not allowed to say Mimikatz. Sorry.
No, we're not saying it. We're talking about Ray Canary and the Atomic Ray team.
Oh,
there you go. So let's talk about doing the attack with inside Azure. How do you do that other than just identity?
Yeah, so we look, we do things like we have purple team exercises, and we do our own kind of simulations in the same way. Yeah, it doesn't need to just be identity. It can be things on an endpoint, or if there's a new vulnerability that's been announced or kind of discovered, we'll try and you can often get the POC code, and we'll have machines that are like essentially sandboxed that we can attempt to run that. See if I guess the first thing you want to see is, do we see this data at all in any form? Are we seeing this happening, or is there a gap in logging? And then again, you start that same process of, okay, now we've seen this event or these events. Can we make a query that's specific enough that it's going to detect it? Because you obviously don't want to write an analytics rule in Sentinel that's just so inaccurate that it's false positives. There's nothing worse, I think, in InfoSec than a tool that it's just false alarms. It's going to be ignored so quickly, and then when the real one's in there, no one's going to be paying attention. So I think that's the key with Sentinel and KQL, is not just can I see it, but is it accurate, what level of false positives are in there.
Yeah. How do you go about deciding what you're going to work on every day? Right. I know you're going to use KQL as the tool, but it's the hammer. But what nail do you decide to hammer on? Right. Is it by you like, man, I'm interested, or is it someone asks you for help and you decide to give me a minute, let me try to figure it out?
For my day-to-day job, usually, like I say, we're quite a dynamic team. There's always something to work on. Simple things like, we want to have a look at how many local admins we've got out there. How easy is that to do? And it turns out that's really easy to do in Sentinel, because although we don't use Defender as our kind of active product, we do have it deployed in passive mode. So we do get all the telemetry from those devices, and then again doing our data summaries. We can have a look at all our devices and who logged on when they're an admin, and what does that look like? Is there an ability to clean that up? And like, blue teaming's often a lot of good hygiene kind of things. It's sometimes not super exciting, but it's reducing local admin privilege, it's reducing privilege, it's getting MFA stood up. We do a lot of we onboard a lot of apps in our team to Azure AD as well, doing the single sign-on config and things like that. So that's what our kind of day looks like. It's a very dynamic company, so we're always pretty busy.
Yeah, we still have a good amount of time left, so I do not want to get out of this by not getting your top 5 queries based on your personal preference. Like, I like this query. This is my best work ever, right? And then versus what your constituents or your audience says. Hey, that query you wrote was pretty good. It saved 9 hours out my day. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a.
I'll
don't know
take
if I
2.
can think of. Yeah, exactly. Like my
I'll
favorite ones, I think
I'll take 2.
probably.
Give me 2 of your
give me 2.
personal favorites. Yeah.
I think the one we mentioned earlier about the MFA credential spamming's quite a good one for sure. Because I think that was quite an interesting attack vector that came along, and it's like when it came along, it's like it makes sense that attackers would try that. I think my favorite ones are any of the ones that can summarize a whole lot of data down into something that's much more readable. So I did one recently, which was, if you're an on-prem customer and you want to move from LDAP to LDAP S, we can actually use the data from Defender to see what's accepting LDAP traffic. And, LDAP can be very, very, very chatty. It could look like thousands and thousands of connections, but when you summarize it down to how many actually unique devices, there's a chance it's 20, 30, depending on the size of your environment. And then that task of migrating is way less overwhelming, because LDAP's like, it's just going to sit there pinging all day, every day, printers and all this kind of stuff just hitting Active Directory, but it might just be 20 devices out there and you can flick them over quite quickly, and it's like a big security tick. I think the ones that were, I guess, the most, not that it's, I guess it's hard to track popularity, but I think things like phishing, MFA, legacy authentication, detecting any kind of reconnaissance on your network. So if you're looking at trying to find machines that are out there kind of doing Nmap type traffic, those are always kind of, people appreciate those ones. And I think people basically copy and paste the queries and run them and then see what pops up. And I've had people reach out and said, oh, this actually found some stuff we weren't expecting, which is an awesome feeling.
Yeah, especially if it's a benign but suspicious, rather than, oh my God, we found something.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just something that's maybe interesting. Like, I wasn't sure, I wasn't aware that was doing that in that way, and that's really interesting. And maybe we can tidy that up before it becomes a kind of a bigger deal. So you get in front of it.
Man, I follow you every day. You're part of my pop on the screen, have my coffee, and say, okay, what do you write today here? Yeah, that's pretty good. Then I go to Rod. Rod, I'm sorry, you've sort of been relegated number 2 now.
That's quite right. I'm not offended. I follow Matt too.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, and man, the work that you're doing, you did it out of just because your love for the stuff. I mean, I look at things from a very corporate type thing. You could have either have monetized any of this stuff, because we've seen companies start up doing what you do, right? Hey, we're going to write these queries for you. We're going to do this we'll do conversions for you, right? There's a huge market. There's a huge market for that, right? But
Matt
I
put
appreciate
a lot of companies out of business, I guess.
Don't think that's true. Hopefully not my current one.
I don't think that. But I think that continue what you're doing. Don't stop. If you want to do, another 365 days of that, Absolutely.
I think-
Any aspirations about getting on stage at Ignite? Any conference? Anybody ask you to come sit down and do like what you're doing here? I mean, but on the
No,
stage.
like I mentioned, up until probably a year ago, I was just like a lot of people. I think just there's so many great people just in the background doing their day-to-day work, and putting yourself out there, as you guys would know, is like putting your face on your Twitter account and saying, "Hey, I built this," or "I'm sharing this," or "I'm trying to help you." It can be a little bit daunting, for sure. But as you mentioned, it's really just about helping the community. I was doing this stuff anyway, trying to teach myself. There's people out there going through the same thing who maybe they're working in a smaller team, and like I mentioned earlier, like being that sole IT person, that's a really tough gig. So I'll never forget that. I also, like, my very first job was on a help desk. So I forever have empathy for help desk people. So if you can help them out as well and make life easier for them, and like I say, I've probably written something that's very similar to what people are asking for. So it's not been a big deal. And yeah, there's no thought to monetizing or anything like that. I get, I do my day-to-day work and I get paid for that, and I do this stuff on the side, and that's cool.
In some respects, you did figure out a way to monetize it, right? Because you will be joining us here very shortly.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I monetize myself. Yeah, that's right.
But see, I totally appreciate that, because you did the right thing, and the unintended circumstance result is, you're getting this job with Microsoft, which I think is super awesome, because I get approached by folks all the time that want to interview with Microsoft, and I tell them, don't come with an ego. Nobody here has an ego, right? We're all just trying to learn, and what you've done for yourself has really helped other people, and that's absolutely what we want and need at Microsoft. So,
yeah, for sure. We'd like to be respectful of, I guess, time. Like you said, you got an early start. Hey, if you don't mind sharing, what part of Australia are you actually in?
Yeah, I live in Perth, which is in Western Australia. So it's just past 6 a.m. now. So we started at 5 a.m. my time, but I've got 2 young kids, so they're usually up at this time anyway. So it's not that they're early lunatic risers like I am. So it's not a big deal. You probably notice me often tweeting at kind of relatively early time here.
Yeah. So, excuse my geographical ignorance. What major tourist city are you close to? And
It's Perth's not very close to anything, actually. I think we're the most isolated city in the world or something. So I'm about a 5-hour flight from Sydney. Yeah, Australia's very large.
Getting up at 5 a.m. is a late start for Edward, I have to tell you. So.
Yeah.
I'm up
early as well.
I do want to have time here to go over this. I forgot that you're actually in our Discord. Stupid me. I sent that email out to you. So if you can jump into the Discord, and so can Rod, we can take a look at this. And then we also have to do our Learn module for the day. Are you good with that, Edward?
Yes, sir. Let's go.
All right. So Rod's going to share his screen, and then we can figure out this KQL issue here. Oh, can you go to the Discord?
Let's see. I think I don't have the app.
Yes. It's acting wonky on mine too. I'm having to do some in my Discord. Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
So much traffic,
from this right here. Yeah.
Oh boy! Now you get to see my login stuff.
1, 2, 3.
Maybe Matt? Can you share your screen if you're looking at it, or?
Yeah, try that real quick. Down at the bottom.
Yeah, let me just log on to Discord.
I forgot you're even a moderator. I forgot about that. I'm used to your other name, your alias.
Reprise.
Okay. So I think the pictures from Noodle MCT.
Yeah, it's
Noodle,
in KQL,
is that the one?
KQL channel.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Share.
So I did, and we'll share while you're doing that, share the links for everything that we talked about today, including your GitHub repo. And I've also found the MFA spam and the LDAP stuff too. So.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So can everyone see that now? I can make it a bit bigger if you like.
Oh, parsing. Yes.
Yeah, always. So you'll see this a lot in KQL. So it's not a problem. So the issue with this is that this is a multi-string value, is that you essentially you could have any number of different elements here. So this one's goes from 0 all the way down to 14, it looks like. So if you try and extract one of these out directly, there's a chance it changes location. So if you're interested in this IP address down here that's been hidden
We're looking
at the
for
moment.
email address.
Yeah, email addresses. Yeah, it's the example, but you don't really know where they start and when the addresses end, and there might be hashes or something. So KQL has an operator called MV expand, and what it basically does is it takes every single one of these, so 0 all the way down to 14, and runs them through as a separate log itself. So if you look, so at the moment you've got, so it says 0 and then it's this Yahoo address, and then at 1 it's this Gmail address. If you do an MV expand on entities, you'll actually end up with 14 or 15 different log entries. And then you'll be able to extract the email addresses out into a list because they'll be in a consistent place. I've got some, let's see if I can find.
So this one record would then expand out into 14 records, you're saying?
Yeah, that's it. Well, let me see.
And then all the stuff, let's say processing end time would be the same for all 14 records.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, then at the end you can have a look at security alert. I'm sure there'll be one in here. So here's a good example. This is probably very similar to what you want. So this is communication with a possible phishing domain. So it's slightly different, but in this one, there could be multiple domain names that a user thinks or has maybe clicked on that's phishing. So we expand the entities out to dynamic forms. Then we go, for every one of our 12 or 13 email addresses that we had in the screenshot, they're now all in the same place. And that's how you kind of deal with that kind of data. And it happens a lot in the security alert table, definitely. So I can help. Noodles messaged me a couple of times actually, so we'll be able to give him a hand for sure. But that's very common. That happens in KQL is that, because it's a multi-value data set, and you don't know, there could be one day there's 2 email addresses in there and the next there's 15.
Yeah.
So we extract it out and make it a little more consistent. Well,
fortunately we have KQL, which allows us to be able to work with that. Otherwise our data sets would just be unmanageable, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So just it turns them into something a little more consistent, and runs it down for you. Then it's always going to be, that email address is always going to be in the same place. It's not going to be in position 0 and then it's going to be in position 8 because you happen to have more email addresses on this particular alert.
Yeah.
So we'll drop him a note in the chat after we finish up.
Excellent. All right, Frank, we ready to share? Oh, there we go. There's my screen. So we need to pay our dues. Appreciate the Microsoft Reactor folks for allowing us to host our show on Microsoft Reactor. This is super awesome. But in doing so, want to highlight a couple things each week. One of those for this week is a new Learn Path. And while this is not on topic with KQL, if we wanted to talk about KQL, we would probably talk about SC200, right, Frank? But we've talked about SC200 a lot, just because it does have Sentinel and Defender for Cloud. But Microsoft Defender for Cloud, as of this morning, has its own learn path, right? So all the way from introduction, how it works, when to use Defender for Cloud versus when to use other things. And of course, along with every learn path, it has a knowledge check. If you take a look at this, it says it's going to take about 27 minutes to complete. I thought about doing it this morning, but I got called off to do other things, so that I didn't accomplish that this morning. But it's about 27 minutes, 6 units, 6 modules to finish it. So this is really good. Microsoft Defender for Cloud. It's one of our awesome tools to be able to help secure for compliance in the cloud and give those recommendations as we start migrating our workloads to the cloud to ensure that we're deploying these things securely or potentially securely.
Yeah. Could I also point out that the SC200 Microsoft Defender for Cloud learning path has been updated. One module's out of order, but if you jump over there, Rod, just go to Google, SC200 exam.
I don't have to jump to Google to do that, do I? Oh, I should have. Well, I was there. There you go.
All right, so scroll down.
Yep.
There should be the third one, which is mitigate threats using Microsoft Defender for Cloud. There's, if you click on the learning path for that. So the courseware or the exam has been updated now to include cloud security posture management.
Oh, excellent.
So if you scroll up to the top, I can tell you the order that things are supposed to go in. So you start with planning for cloud workload protection. Now this one's out of order. It should be fixed, which is explain cloud workload protections, but we'll come back to that. So realistically speaking, it should be plan for cloud workload protection, go down. Then we talk about how to connect Azure assets, then how to connect non-Azure assets. Then you talk about cloud security posture management. Then you would talk about cloud workload protection and then also managing security alerts from there. So this actually has been updated with what would be considered the July release of the content. But most importantly now, SC200 includes cloud security posture management related questions, or I don't know when that will be out, but the skills measured has been updated for that.
Well, look at that too. So I did complete this before, and look, so there's new stuff in there, enough in there that it says I didn't complete it. This one's only 97%. This one's only 90 because of the things that have been added, right?
Yeah. Well, the KQL one has been updated to, so I can talk about just the third and fourth one here. The KQL one has been updated to a lot of the data that was used before when this was originally written. They were actually, populating in the AKLA demo. They weren't anymore. So now analyze queries results using KQL only uses sign-in logs and security event tables so that they will always work for you. So yeah, back in the day, everything worked, but then they just stopped populating certain tables there. So in here, you would talk about analyzing results, building the multi-table, and working with the data down there. That actually does, if you click into that one, creating extract data from structured string data. You'll actually have the MV expand go up to the third list there, and yeah, right there. That will have your MV expand scenario that we talked about. So there you go.
Yep,
so yeah, this is all of these will be being updated.
Oh, this is great.
Next month.
This is awesome.
Good stuff.
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Frank.
Well, we will always let our guests have the last word as we get ready to close out this awesome reactor session and podcast session. So, Matt, you have the last word.
Yeah, just thank you guys for having me on. I tried to follow along when I'm at home. It's obviously a early time for me, but when I can, I jump in and listen along. So it's been an absolute pleasure coming in. I'm looking forward to pinging you on Teams in a couple of weeks and seeing how you're doing. So that'll be cool. And anyone that's followed along or dropped me messages. So I'd just like to thank you for the support. It's been overwhelmingly positive and not what I expected at all when I started. And hopefully there's a query in there for you that's helped you. And if you need a hand, feel free to reach out. Always happy to help.
Oh, by the way, Frank, we need to get like an ending audio thing for our podcast.